The Cooperative Governance Ministry is on a mission to rescue struggling municipalities. Yesterday, it announced that it has deployed engineers and experts to help tackle infrastructural and governance issues. They have been deployed to 55 troubled municipalities in all 9 provinces. Well, Ndiso Consulting's Chief Revenue Officer, Mielani Holeni, joins us now, and he's an expert in this field. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, when you heard that the ministry making the announcement at that briefing yesterday, what went through your mind?
Well, let's start by saying it's a welcome step by the ministry. We have had a number of interventions within the local government space. So this one is maybe not so unique, and let's accept that, we're dealing with a very complex, ecosystem of a municipality, but we welcome it as the first start. But looking at the fact that you're looking at deploying engineers, town planners, and in some in fact, the announcement also talks about graduates within there. It means that, there's seriousness around tackling the issues there. But the issues are actually much wider than just deploying those engineers within there, because the vacancies within the municipalities are rampant. Some still remain, where you don't have technical managers, you don't have people who are actually doing the work. So it's good, we can deploy the consultants, but we need to make sure that we also populate the structure so that that structure starts to function well. So
what in your analysis are the reasons why these critical posts seemingly can't be filled?
Well, there's always skills migration. People are always migrating into better positions in the bigger cities. Some people, for instance, are also moving into the private sector. So the local government space, we must accept, it's one of the spaces which is not taken seriously in our view, because that's where a lot of skilled people should be deployed. And you find that people are opting instead to be in the other spheres of government, or at least the greener pastures, elsewhere in the private sector.
So we have not
made that environment.
It's because it's not being, that space is not being taken.
Well, if you look at, for instance, the way that local government as a sphere, there were always, debates around, the spheres of government and so on and so forth. So if you look at local government as a sphere, it's taken as the last tier. And it's that tier that receives only 9% of the fiscus from a budget point of view. So if you look at provincial, about 43, national, the rest of the budget. So in terms of even the budgets there, and it's one of the spaces which must generate its own revenue, and it must also make sure that it pays its own way. So if you look at the rest of the other areas, it also has highly skilled officers within there. So for us, it's a space which is starved of investment, or at least funding that should be going into that space. So in some cases, they even battle to keep the skills within the space. So then there's governance breakdown within there.
But then when one looks at categories like municipal managers, executive directors, for example, it doesn't seem like money is the issue there, because those people seem to be remunerated fairly well. It looks like there are other problems that have nothing to do with the amounts of money that they are able to pay them.
So the higher echelons are well remunerated, and those positions, as you well know, 5-year positions, third, fourth year.
There's a very high turnover of people there. People don't stay there.
Absolutely.
People leave long before their contracts are even halfway through.
Absolutely. So if you look at the lack of stability from the 3rd year, where you're looking at where do you go for your next positioning. So those are the positions that municipal managers, if you look at vacancies that are there, chief financial officers, vacancies that are there, heads of budgets, head of revenue, and all those critical positions within there. So what we're saying is that there's a lot more work that needs to be done around getting the municipal or the local government system working, the governance issues. We also talk about, the outside, forces in terms of, the interference within the space, which may cause, some of the people to go. But we're also looking at critical systems within there, such as the revenue systems, because a municipality has to generate its own revenue. And if it's not strong enough, or it does not have the right kind of skills, the right kind of strategies, you end up not generating that revenue. So it ends up not being able to fund its own budget. So what you're seeing now is that municipalities are overstating meeting their budgets, or they are not able to meet their budget targets there. So that means that there's a collapse with service delivery there. So what we're calling for as well is looking at generally having financial sustainability plans within the municipalities, so that those financial sustainability plans are tracked, and we're looking at making sure the assets are also productive, because that's one other area where the assets are not being made productive. So hence we welcome the deployment of engineers, but the complex systems of financial skills, and there's also other skills as well, such as your human resource skills. There's also legal skills which are required there. So a municipality is a melting pot of a number of various skills and a number of various strategies that must be deployed to ensure that the system works. It is not as simple as it's a commercial entity of sorts within a government sphere.
But I mean, apart from finances, just how welcoming do you think, I mean, is that space, you know, to people who don't really belong there, like the ones who are going to be deployed now? These are like engineers and other experts. And the reason I'm asking this is because some donkey years ago, they had something, I think it was called Project Consolidate, yes. You know, where engineers, accountants and such people were deployed to these municipalities. And they were not a burden financially on the municipalities, because they were getting their money from somewhere else. I believe the DBSA, if I remember correctly, was also involved. But then that whole project collapsed because that space wasn't welcoming to those people who were coming in to actually help those municipalities.
Absolutely. So some of the people must expect to face a culture shock, for instance, within the local government, because perhaps things are done differently. If you look at, you know, most of the people, we may not be sure which spheres they would have come from. If you come from the private sector, it's almost, you know, taken as a particular culture or straightforward. So I think some of them need to be schooled actually, so that they understand how the MFMA works, how the MSA works. So there's a lot of also background induction that must be done, so that when those people land within a municipality, they must be able to understand what is possible, what is not possible, and how is it that they can work with the legislation, because you are still faced with a supply chain management framework that must be followed to the tier. So things may not happen as quickly as possible, and you need people who will be tenacious to be able to push through the various things. There's a lot of documentation that must be done. So there's a lot of compliance that those people must be faced with. So that space as well is a space that, you know, for some it may be a foreign space where they are just, you know, maybe used to doing something as quickly as a month or so. So, but despite that, we need to expedite the turnaround times, because the validity of some of the tenders which are submitted within there, some go beyond 90 days and they even lapse. So those are things that, you know, would need to be jump-started. But the system which is required is, how about those people actually becoming the part and parcel of the skills for the municipalities, not just being deployed or parachuted for a while. So we're looking for those financial, for those sustainable solutions that will get people to warm up and be able to stay within the local government space.